The harsh reality was, as a pharmaceutical rep, I worked the next 13 years working my butt off and making a lot more money than I had made as a physical therapist. But I didn't have all the freedoms that I thought I did. And it was like selling my soul to the devil.
All right, guys, we got a good one lined up today. I'm excited for you guys to be able to get this podcast. I've got a really good friend of mine, Gary Stern, with us today. Gary, it's awesome to have you join me for a few minutes.
Thanks for letting me jump on, Brandon. I'm honored to be here, buddy.
Yeah, man, I know you're going to bring some good content to these guys today. Let's give them a little bit of your background. You and I have known each other for the better part of, a little bit more than 15 years, because I knew you a little bit through the cycling world before the business world, but give them a little bit of Gary Stern's background. I know you lived in a couple different states, different areas. Give you some background.
Yeah. So currently residing in Melbourne, Florida. So just across the coast from where Brandon is, and been in this same area now for almost 30 years. After having moved away, I lived in Colorado for a while. My background, and I say currently because I also have a second home up in Blue Ridge, Georgia. So very fortunate that, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, later on of how that happened. And mainly as a result of this business. Some of the things that you and I are going to talk about in a little while through network marketing. Background, been married for coming up on 25 years next year, 24 this year, the big 25 next year.
That's a big one. You got plans yet? Or is it going to be
we started talking about, we might do one of those riverboat cruises, the European ones where you go down like the Rhine or the Rhone or something else that rhymes with one of those. So, and we have a 19-year-old son who just finished his first year at the University of Florida. So that's exciting. He's studying statistics up there. And as you get to know me, you'll never know where he got that from. So he's a Florida Gator. He's home for the summer right now. And, growing up, I was raised by a single mom. I watched her work all the time, not some of the hours, not most of the hours, but all the hours. She was a manager at a retail department store. And so you figure from about Thanksgiving all the way through New Year's, I didn't see her because that's when you guys go do all your shopping and go to all those sales. And who was the one running the store during that entire time? It was my mom. And so being raised by a single mom, I had to learn responsibility at a young age of cooking, cleaning, taking care of myself, and all those things. My wife would like to tell you that I've forgotten how to do all those things nowadays. But yeah, so I watched her work really, really hard and then pass away of cancer. And then I watched my dad work really hard his entire life.
How old were you when she passed away?
I was 25 when my father passed away of cancer, 27 when my mom passed away.
Okay.
She was 59. My dad was 63. So, and that's what I was going to say is my dad, same thing. He worked hard his whole life, traveled all over the world, and retired for less than 5 years and died of cancer. And so those things stuck in my head. I knew I didn't want to be on that same boat as them. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So you lived in Florida. You went to school. I know you went to Florida State, but you also went to some other schools too, didn't you?
I went to Florida State and then transferred to the University of Florida, where my son is now, and graduated with a physical therapy degree. So that's my formal schooling was go to high school. There wasn't ever a choice. I know your and I's journeys are different. Mine was always, you're going to go to high school, you're going to go to college, you're going to get a job. That's just what I knew, right? That was how I was brought up. And I didn't know there was any other way of doing it. And got out in the physical therapy world, loved it for a couple of years. But when my parents passed away, it was a wake-up call. My dad passed away first. So I left the dream job working with professional athletes out in Colorado to move back to Florida to take care of my mom. I don't regret that not one iota, because I got 2 more quality years with my mom before she passed.
So you got into the physical therapy world with top end athletes right out of school?
It took about 2 years to get to that point. I 1.5 to 2 years after I graduated, I went to work directly for one of the places I had an internship with up in Jacksonville, Florida, and worked on not only my physical therapy degree, but also my athletic training certification. When the Steadman Hawkins Clinic in Vail saw that and I applied for the job out there, they said, here's a guy that has the physical therapy background, the sports medicine and athletic training background. We want him, because they wanted somebody that could also cover events. You know, if there was a ski race in Vail and somebody went down, Dr. Steadman is taking care of them, and members of our staff were on site there to help administer. I wouldn't call it first aid per se, but to administer initial triage, bring them straight into the clinic and start doing rehab right away. Whether that's just ice, wrist, and compression, or whether that's actually starting to do some range of motion exercises and get them ready for inevitably surgery most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So then from there, what was the next step? Yeah. I know you didn't stay in physical therapy. So what was the next step?
No. So then I moved back home to take care of my mom. And what I realized was time, right? Time is our precious resource. And I was constantly bringing my mom to doctor's appointments and having to take care of her. She was really sick. She was going through chemo and everything else. And I realized I'd have to call and cancel my appointments for the day as a physical therapist. I'd have to call and cancel other appointments. And I'm like, this just isn't working. I need more time freedom. And I realized that there was a pharmaceutical rep that had been coming in and out taking care of my mom. He was bringing the drugs that they were giving her, the chemo drugs. And I talked to him about his job, and I'm like, this is perfect. I can bring doctors lunch and take them out golfing and make the same or more money than I'm making as a physical therapist and only work like 3 hours a day. That was my thought process.
Yeah.
The reality, the harsh reality was, as a pharmaceutical rep, I worked the next 13 years working my butt off and making a lot more money than I had made as a physical therapist. But I didn't have all the freedoms that I thought I did. And it was like selling my soul to the devil. Golden handcuffs were on. Mom passes away. I end up meeting my wife and going on to get married. And the rest is history. You know, you buy houses and cars and have a kid and all the expenses that come with all those things. It's like you're almost stuck. Okay, you get used to that lifestyle. And if I wanted to leave it, I would have to quit the pharmaceutical realm. But that's a big salary to replace.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think a lot of people, well, let's talk about you first. Do you think that nice income kept you in that job longer than it should have?
100%. No question.
Do you think that's the case for other people? Do you think they're making so much money that they're scared to walk away from the money to do something, to get away from what they're, really, they know it's killing them, but they're just scared to leave the money?
In every case, not some, all 100%. I mean, here's how I liken it, Brandon. When you have a quote, sure shot, meaning that paycheck, and it's not a sure shot, but the perception is it is, because I also sat by the phone every 6 months to see if I still had a job every time they did layoffs. Yeah. Right. Like right now, one of the companies I invest in, Tesla, is on their 3rd round of layoffs in the last 2 weeks. He's like, screw it. If you're worried because other people are losing their jobs, then I don't even want you here anymore. Basically saying that even if you were here for the last 6 years and you've led Tesla from being an X company to being a 10X company, you're still replaceable. Right. And that was the case in pharmaceuticals. And it's the same everywhere. But the false perception that people get is that their job is stable. So they're afraid to go try something else. And the uncertainty of the something else versus the stability of the job. And quite frankly, it's the other way around. We just don't know it because we've been brainwashed into thinking our jobs are stable. And as you've always said, they're paying us the least amount they possibly can to get us to stay there and not quit.
Yep, that's the deal. Like, I thought about it one day, and as an ex-employer, it really didn't settle well with me when the thought crossed my mind, but that is the reality. As an employer, it is your job to pay your employees as little as you can pay them and keep them there.
Yes.
Because if you overpay all the employees, if you overpay their production, or if you overpay the value, the alternative is you go out of business. There is no business. You go out of business.
There is no business. Right.
Right. And so an employer has to pay people as little as they can pay them and keep them happy. And that is just a nasty, nasty, horrible thought, environment, and process. But that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
Absolutely. And I realize that now after the fact, but when you're deep in the middle of it and the mortgage is due, and then right after that, a couple car payments are due, or a car payment if you have a company car for one of them. And then right after that, you're saving some money for college for your kid. And then you have to pay your utility bills. Then you have to pay for your groceries. And mind you, I'm describing all this back in 2011. So we had the great financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we're in 2010, 2011. Things were looking up then. Inflation never got up to 9 or 10%. I know they said it was 6 or 7, but it was well over 10. Don't let them fool you. But it back then didn't even feel that bad. Nowadays, I mean, you lose a job nowadays, it's game over, because chances are your credit cards are maxed, and any of the quote stimulus money, which was just, they basically gave you a tax refund ahead of time and then taxed you on the back end and took it all back. That's inflation. So the tax refunds are spent.
Fancy tax code called inflation. So eventually you were introduced to network marketing. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but because I think I really can't wait to dive into the financial conversation with you for everybody that's going to listen to this information. But give us a little bit of the transition from 6-figure income to now you're in network marketing. Like, how did that go down? Why did you make the decision? What emotions were you going through when you made the decision?
No, I know exactly what you're looking for, and I know what the listeners need to hear. So on the outside, things were good, right? If you were on the outside looking in, you're like, wow, Gary's got it made, right? Things are good in Gary's life right now. And what they didn't see was on the inside what was going on, right? When you say sick and tired, number one, I was still training hard, like hardcore, to be a top level cyclist. Yes, an amateur level, but as a master's level athlete, it was what I turned to when my mom and dad passed away. It was my drug, so to speak, or my passion was cycling. So I'm training like a madman all the time, trying to fit that in with work and home life and everything else, and literally exhausted. So that's the tired part. But I was also sick and tired of the work part, because sitting by a phone every 6 months to see if you still have a job, watching managers berate female employees right there in front of you when you were raised by a single mom, that don't fly. That doesn't fly very well with somebody like me. But I had to harbor those emotions and go home with them every night and then unload on the people that I do love, which is my wife and my son, about the crummy stuff that happened all day long. And so that's the part that nobody else saw. I kept it in. I kept it hidden from the rest of the world. So when Simon, my cycling coach, who you know very well, you were the one that introduced it to Simon and knew him through the cycling world. When Simon came to me and said, hey, there's something you need to take a look at. For once, I listened. Why? Trust.
Yeah.
Trust factor. I'm paying him to coach me in cycling. If he says there's something I need to take a look at, I'm paying him for advice. I better take his advice and at least look at it. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it, but I looked at it. So
yeah. And if anybody knows, if anybody knows that guy, you just know that he's such a good guy. And so that is a big factor, right? When people are trying to get this information, when I say this information, network marketing, if you're trying to get the information in front of someone, would you say the company or the product or the comp plan is less important than the relationship of the person that introduces it to you? Like what's of
100%.
higher value?
100%. Because think about it this way. You've heard the expression, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So I knew Simon cared about me. So then I wanted to know what he knew. But before that, if he knew all this information and spouted a bunch of information on me, and it was coming from somebody that I thought was just trying to scam me out of another, $100, $1,000, whatever the cost was, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to listen. Yeah. But I listened to Simon and I perked up when he said something about clinical studies. That's what took it for me. I had said no at that point 28 other times to other network marketing opportunities, 28 times. Half of them I took looks at, half of them I never even looked at because I didn't like the person bringing it to me. Right. Again, going back to the relationship. So only half of the time did I even look at it. And half the times that I looked at it, then there was something wrong with the product, the company, the compensation, or in some cases, my timing. It wasn't the right time for me. But this time, the studies were the hook. Well, Simon and I's relationship was the start. The hook was the clinical studies. And then realizing that, well, this is something my wife and I are going to take for the rest of our lives.
Right.
But I'm not going to do the silly business.
Yeah.
And then he connected me on a phone call to you. Yeah. And you're like, well, bro, if you're going to tell your people you love and care about, then you're doing the business. I said, no, I just told you I'm not going to do the business. And you're like, no, bro, that is the business. And I'm like, oh, that's it? Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Just go out and tell some people about something that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I remember the phone call. It was a good phone call. So for those people that are listening that maybe don't know Gary has had tremendous success in network marketing, has sold millions of dollars. Him and his teams have sold millions of dollars of product. He's $1 million earner or more. I don't know where you fall now, but you've earned 7 figures in the industry, and done really well. You've got a really cool team. Actually, Gary's got some aspects of his organization that are on such autopilot that it would blow your mind if you knew how much they were on autopilot. It's really cool. But I want to ask you just a couple more questions about network marketing.
Sure.
And I want to jump to the financial stuff, but what we know, everybody's got obstacles when they come into this thing. Typically the first year, 2 years is where you really ride that emotional roller. The first couple of weeks, first couple of months, definitely the first year, there's a roller coaster of emotions. So what was the biggest obstacle for you? Since you had said no, you said 28 times, like what was the biggest obstacle for you? Once you said yes and you're in, now you're telling people, what was the thing like, man, this is hard to overcome? Was there some stuff?
Yeah. So I would say it's two things, and don't confuse confidence with arrogance, because what I'm about to say might sound a little bit arrogant. But number one, everything else up to that point had come easy. I just worked a little bit harder on the front end learning stuff, and then just went and applied it. So whether that was physical therapy, whether that was pharmaceutical sales, everything up to that point, looking back, had come relatively easy. So I expected this to be equally as easy. And it was harder because I had to change. And there were things about me that I had to change where no longer did I have to be the expert. I just had to know somebody who was an expert and go find the answer somewhere for them. I may not be the one delivering the answer, but somebody else is, number one. And number two, my what I would call my EQ, which is my emotional quotient. So you have an IQ, which is your intelligence quotient. No issues there. Again, that's not arrogance. That's just things were coming easy, right? EQ, that's a different story. Fortunately for me, you can change your EQ. Your IQ, you're kind of stuck with it, right? There are people with below average intelligence that go on to do extraordinary things in life. Why? Well, they made up for it with EQ. EQ is your emotional quotient. That's like your relationships.
Do you think, let me jump in there. Do you think a lot of people that are successful just because they're too stupid to quit?
Perhaps. Persistence. Yes. Persistence is key. Yeah. That's a funny thing, but yes.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I think,
Yeah, because some of the more intelligent ones are like, got it, this should be easier than it is. It doesn't make sense to me. And they just say, screw it and quit and go use that elsewhere. But yeah, I think some people I don't love the word stupid. I don't like calling somebody stupid, but yeah, I think they're just obstinate, right? They're just like, forget about it. I'm gonna make this work. And there were points in my career, you said the biggest obstacle, but about the emotional roller coaster, the lows, like where I'm like, I'm out, I quit. There were more days that I felt like that than more days that I felt like going.
Yeah.
In the early years, especially in the first couple of years, the first 1 to 2 years, because and I know a lot of these are cliches, but they're things that just pop right into my mind. One that sticks in my mind is you will grossly overestimate what you're capable of in the first year and grossly underestimate what you're capable of in 10 years.
Yeah.
That was me. I thought, man, I'm going to kill this thing. And within a year, I'll be a pro, the top rank of our company.
Yeah.
And within a year, I wasn't the top rank of our company. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is impossible. But I never thought where I could be 10 years later, where in 10 years later, like you said, a lot of the business was on autopilot by that part, allowing me freedoms that I never thought were possible. So that's, I think people need to get that early on is it's worth it. A certain mutual friend of ours taught me that when he taught me the X factor of network marketing. The workload is not commensurate with the pay early on. In fact, you're grossly underpaid. At some point, those two cross. And if you are persistent enough and you personally develop enough, you'll go on the other side of it and you'll be grossly overpaid for the amount of effort that you're currently putting in at that time, not including what you had done in the past. But at that point in time, the amount of effort you're putting in at that point in time, you're grossly overpaid for.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I knowing you as well as I do, we could talk for a long time about some of these stories, but I knew there were some obstacles. What's been the biggest thing you've gained from network marketing outside of the commission checks?
Yeah, great question. One last obstacle. The ridicule from my friends and family.
Oof. That's a tough one.
They thought I was crazy.
That's a tough one.
But then again, here we are 13 years later. I had to think what year we're in. So I've been in network marketing for 13 years. And here we are 13 years later. And my friends still think I'm crazy. My family still think I'm crazy. Not about what I did in network marketing, just in life. So I think sometimes it takes a crazy person to do this, where
crazy
you don't
/
care
stupid.
what anybody thinks.
Crazy, stupid, nuts.
Crazy, stupid, both. But where you just don't care. Like I honestly, my wife, it drives her crazy sometimes. But I'm like, I just don't care what other people think. They don't pay my bills. They don't live my life. I live mine on my terms. And so I'd say the greatest thing that outside you said of the salary or outside of the commission checks, the income, that's also a twofold. I would say it's freedom and it's the friendships, the two F's, freedom and friendships. Freedom's obvious. We'll talk about that. That's where you have not just financial freedom. I mean, there are people that make a boatload of money and they look like everything is fine in their lives financially. They have zero time. Mm-hmm. That's the freedom I'm talking about, is more the time freedom side of things. Mm-hmm. But going back to the friendship side of thing, it's lifelong friends. It's lifelong friends that you might not talk to for months. And then all of a sudden, it's just like you pick up right where you left off. Mm-hmm. It's constantly meeting new people. It's the new people that you're meeting that force you to be a better version of yourself. Case in point, there's at least 3 leaders in network marketing right now, 3 coaches, and you know who they are, that all 3 of them are the fittest I've ever seen them in their lives. One lives in Vegas. One lives in Utah. The other one lives in Dubai. Mm-hmm. And so I'm watching, but I didn't know those guys before this industry, but I'm watching them and it's pushing me to say, you know what, dude, gaining 20 or 25 pounds over the last couple years because you gotten a little bit lazy, it's pushing me to want to be a better version of myself. That's not to mention all the quote personal development along the way, and the being better at being a husband and a father and a thought leader and a coach and a mentor. That all helped. But now I'm still being coached by them in different ways, and they don't even know, those three guys don't even know they're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe the same. I believe the biggest thing I've got outside of the commission checks is the network. In fact, I believe the network is more valuable than the money I've earned because of the network. If I had to start over again, if I had to start over, I would absolutely crush it again because my network is bigger, better, stronger than it was when I started. My network is what allows me.
Agree 100%. Your network when you started network marketing was maybe a 2 and is now an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Probably a 10. Yours is closer to a 10 out of 10. Mine was a 2 when I started, and it's probably an 8 right now.
Yeah, I heard something recently. It was, I'll paraphrase a little bit, but it was basically a question. And I'll ask you the question. If you were trying to start a business, how many people do you personally know that you've got their number or you know them well enough that you could reach out to them and ask them for $200,000? How many people do you know have access to $200,000? What do you think it is?
That I personally know now that would be willing to do it?
Just
probably nowadays, probably between 50, probably about 50 people. About 50 people.
50. How incredible is that? Because the average person knows one or two.
One or two. Correct. One or two. Yeah, I'm pulling in some of the you know the network marketing business and some of the other things that I've been involved in the investing world. But I've got case in point, I have a guy that offered me $100,000 and wanted me to manage it for him, and I told him no. I just didn't.
Yeah.
I'd rather teach him. I tell people I don't like to become a fisherman. I love to be a fishing instructor. I want to be the fishing instructor.
Yeah. But I think that's a good way to look at your network, right? Don't you think that's a good way to look at your network if you're heading in the right direction?
Powerful.
How many people in your network, if you needed 200 grand to start a business, because you're not going to a bank, you know, good luck going to a bank and asking 200 grand. So,
that's not going to happen.
Yeah. So how many people do you know in your network has access to 200 grand that could loan it to you?
Approximately 50 right now.
And that should tell you everything you need to know about if you got work to do on your network. And I think that is the biggest thing that you get from network marketing outside of the commission. The commission changes your life. But really, if you want to scale your commissions from network marketing, you ultimately have to invest, whether that's startup businesses, vehicles that we're going to talk about here in a second. Ultimately, it's not how much money you make in network marketing. It's because it's kind of like professional athletes or lottery winners, not necessarily lottery winners, but let's talk about professional athletes. They make millions over the course of a short period of time. Most of their professional athletes' careers is 3, 4, 5 years. Some go 20, but most are 3 or 4 years. So they make a lot of money in a short period of time. And a lot of these guys are just flat broke within a short period of time after the career. So it's not the amount of money you make. So let's talk about the business side of network marketing. Let's talk about becoming a professional. So what advice would you give to someone that's in network marketing? Maybe they've never owned a business before, Gary, but let's say they're earning now $2,000 a month. They're earning $3,000 a month. They're probably still treating it like a hobby because they don't have any business training. What immediate things do you think they should start implementing to start treating their money with respect and a business?
So, I mean, I can talk to this. When I first started, and every bit of money that I made in the network marketing space up through the first probably $4,000 or $5,000 a month, in my case, right? You can do this same thing with the $2,000 a month, the example you just gave. I saved. Now, saved it's not what they used to be. Savings accounts, newsflash, savings accounts don't pay 8 to 10% like they did for Brandon and I when we were kids. Right. I don't know if you remember that, but the little statements we used to get, paper statements, and they were like 8 to 10%. Yeah, that don't fly. But what I mean save is, put it away, because you never know. In network marketing, you're going to have great months and you're going to have lean months. You're going to have great seasons and you're going to have lean seasons, as some of the coaches in network marketing call it. And so to prepare for that, get in the habit of saving while you still have another income coming in. Saving, what does that mean? That means everything from high yield savings accounts or T-bills, treasury bills, which are fixed income, all the way up through stocks and options and cryptocurrencies, or whatever it is that you find, real estate. There's gold, silver, anything but keeping it in just a US dollar, because the dollar is constantly decreasing. Experts vary on this, but the best I've heard is 8 to 10% a year, the dollar is going down in valuation. The worst I've heard is 14%. That's Saifedean Ammo saying that. I believe it's somewhere in the middle, 10 to 12%. And people will think I'm nuts for that. Go take a look. The average house 4 years ago was about $280,000, and the average house payment was about $1,500. The average house today is $425,000 a year. And the average payment is about $2,800 because of interest rates on the mortgage, and because the house itself has gone from 280 to 425. But
okay, so let's strip it down. When you say save it, okay, and you're saying, like, we're not talking about a savings account, but let's say someone started out and they only have a personal checking account, because the reason a lot of people don't ever take the next step business wise is they're scared. They don't know how to run a business. They've only had one checking account and savings account their whole life. So if they're going to save it, what do they do, Gary? Do they go to their local bank and open another account? What would be your advice for someone that can save the $200 or the $1,000 a month? Where should they put it? Who should they go talk to?
So initially, you have a couple of options. One, you could select a financial advisor. No digs against the general financial advisors out there. It served me very well early on when I didn't want to take a super active role in my money. And also, we're talking 30 years ago. Times were different then. But in today's day and age, they're going to immediately put you into something that's relatively safe and that just grows at about the same rate the money supply is expanding. So essentially maintains your purchasing power. You don't grow it. Yeah. And they're going to take a commission for that. So you're actually losing money when you're invested if all you're doing is maintain. So that's one option. And again, there are certain people that don't want to have anything to do with it. If they're scared, like you're saying, and that fear is holding them back, go find a reputable financial advisor. If you're willing to take it over and learn, then that's where you have to go and do the work. So you did the work to get good enough at network marketing, right? To start making excess money each month, excess meaning above and beyond what you were making the month before. So why not go do some work in the evenings? Go educate yourself on YouTube. Go educate yourself online. And that's what I did 4 years ago. I just buckled down. I found a couple of reputable websites. One of them is on YouTube. I'm not shilling this guy or anything else, but his advice has changed my life. It's called Invest Answers. Invest Answers. He doesn't sell any kind of investment products or advice, with the exception of some indicators that you can use on your charts if you want to start learning how to do charts and things along those lines. So that's how I started. I literally started over again, taught myself the charts and put the indicators over it, using him for more of the what I would call fundamental analysis of companies to have an idea. If that sounds overwhelming to you, start simple. Go online and search what are the best savings accounts. What you're looking for is you're looking for a high yield savings account that is FDIC insured up to $250,000. Once you get up over $250,000, worry about that later, right?
Yeah.
But if
and
it's
you can
FDIC
find them, you can find them all day long for over 4%. All day,
4.5 to 5. Right now, it's 4.5 to 5%. That's step one. So you have this excess money coming. I say excess. You said $200. Let's say it's $200 a month or $250 a month. And you just start sliding that into that savings account. Once you've saved up, some say 3 months, some say 6, some say a year, whatever makes you comfortable that if you lost your job and all sources of income, what would sustain you for X amount of time? 3 months? Could you get by it for 3 months or 6 months? 6 is the standard answer that I hear the most. So if you're spending $2,500, $3,000 a month to live on.
Yep.
Then that means you need
18 grand in a slosh bucket. 18,000.
3 times 6 is 18 grand. Yeah, you need 20 grand in that savings account. Once it gets to 20 grand, now you can take the next step of adding on more risk. Because now you have some confidence under your belt. You sat and watched. If you're earning 5% interest in one of those accounts, it's just under 0.5% a month. Is an easy way of looking at it. You have $10,000 in there. 1% of $10,000 is $100. Mm-hmm. So 0.5% of that, you're looking at $50 of 40. So if you have $10,000 in there, that's 40 extra dollars you'll have the next month doing nothing, just putting it in there and letting the compounding take over.
Right.
Then you take the next step, because the higher the risk you take, the more reward you take. What's the next risk? Perhaps looking into gold and silver. That's more of a hedging strategy, in my opinion. Stocks. Do you have to go and trade individual stocks? No, you could look at index funds. Why an index fund? It's trading the entire market. It's less risky than an individual stock, but it also gives you less reward usually than an individual stock. Mm-hmm. And in the index fund, you're looking at a 0.1 to 0.2% fee on an annual basis, which is nothing, right? 0.1 to 0.2% on an annual basis. And they are hand selecting and tracking the markets for you. Right. And you just get a mix of those. Or you could go to individual stocks. Last but not least, cryptocurrencies. I believe if the US dollar is going down on an annual basis, going down meaning because of inflation. That's what inflation is. As the money supply grows, each individual unit is worth less than they were before. If you have 100 of something and all of a sudden you grew the supply to 120, each of the previous 100 are 20% less valuable because now there's 20% more of them in the world. Dollars are no different.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you... So once someone decides they're going to start, channeling some money to some different areas, let's start out simple, right? Do you believe, well, we know most Americans have credit card debt. Do you believe it's more important to wipe out the debt first, or should they start investing their money first?
Absolutely, because the debt that you just mentioned is bad debt. What is the difference between good debt and bad debt? Good debt is a mortgage rate on a house at 3%. Because if
or
money
even 6%, even 6 or 7%, because what's the interest on a credit card?
The interest on a credit card nowadays, I think, is 25 or 30%.
So what's
the reason
what's
I don't
better,
even
right?
know,
like what's better, 7% or 20%, right?
And the reason why I don't even know is because I don't ever carry a balance, because that's the first thing that needs to get wiped out, period.
So before so let me ask you, well, here's my philosophy. I'll tell you guys, build the safety net first. That 6-month safety net, build that first. Okay. You need to build that first, right? Even before the debt, because they're not going to, like, if you really have an emergency, what you need is your hands on some cash. So build that emergency fund first. Then the next thing you do is you get rid of the debt. That's the next thing you do. And part of the problem with credit card debt is that it's not a lack of money that you make, it's a lack of discipline with what you do with the money. So my point is, if you have the discipline to save the money instead of spend it, when you have enough accumulated, when you have that 6 months accumulated, whatever that is, you'll then have the discipline to pay the credit card off instead of continuing to charge things.
To add to it. That's a great, that is, I hope people listen to what you just said. That's sage advice right there. Because credit card debt is more of an emotional problem. There are rare exceptions. I mean, I'm talking, you don't, but again, no, that's still, it all goes back to discipline. I was going to say there's rare exceptions where all of a sudden you get nailed with a giant bill that you absolutely have to live. Your car completely dies and you need a new one because you work so far away that but even in that case, why not Uber for a little while?
Yep. Or
instead of
if you really, like, if I really had to do credit
card debt, Uber until your Uber bill gets more expensive than what a car payment would be.
Yep.
It's less convenient.
Yep.
You don't have any, you lose your status of rolling up in whatever car it was that broke down on you. But at the same time, but that relies back on discipline again. It's so funny. Like everything, I was trying to give an example that didn't roll back to discipline. All roads lead back to discipline.
Yeah. And if you really want to do it right, what I tell you, which you guys should do, is you don't not make the credit card payment. What you should do is be stashing your cash, putting the what I call buckets, right? Your 6 month emergency cash bucket. You should be filling that bucket, right? But what I would do is, instead of ignoring the credit card debt, I would reach out to my network, parents, friends, and say, guys, listen, I'm putting a serious business plan together. I'm trying to get rid of some credit card debt. Will you give me a loan at 10% interest to go pay the credit card debt off? Like, if you have $30,000 in credit card debt, it would be better to go to a friend or several friends and offer them 10% interest and go get the loan, pay the credit cards off, because that's 20, 25, 28% interest. Yes. And you've lowered that to 10%. Like, I wouldn't ignore the credit card debt. I would just become
then goes back to that network question you asked me. How valuable is your network? Who can you go and ask for that money from?
Right. Right. And so,
great question. You're right. You don't ignore it, but if you could do it at the same time or lower the rate in some way, shape, or form, absolutely. Credit card debt is the worst debt you can carry.
Yeah.
Worst.
Yeah. If you got access to cash somehow, like maybe you're a homeowner. Most people take lines of credit on their home and they go buy toys. They go buy bad debt. So if you've got credit card debt and you've got equity in your home, get your hands on that equity. Go pay the credit card debt off, but cut up the credit cards, destroy the credit cards, like get rid of them. Right.
Absolutely.
And then start filling that emergency bucket immediately. Like that's step one for you guys, or step 1 and 2. Once they get beyond that, Gary, once they've got the 6 month bucket filled, they've got no more credit card debt, or the credit card debt is just for the current month. They pay their credit cards off every month, like you and I, right? Which I think is a great strategy. I got Delta points and Marriott points and American Express points for days. Wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you do that, you started to kind of talk about some of the other investments out there. What do you believe? Like, what do you believe today? Like, what's your strategy? Do you have a strategy? Let's say Gary Stern gets his hands on $10,000 over and above his living expenses, over and above his lifestyle. Gary's got his hands on 10 grand over and above what he needs to keep him and his wife and family happy. What is your philosophy or formula? Do you have a formula for that 10 grand?
I don't know that it's a hard, fast, like 10% here, 20% there. A lot of times, because I'm so involved in the markets, and that was something I didn't say to the listeners, is that for the last year and a half, especially, I've been glued to the markets. Mm-hmm. Crypto space, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and the like, Solana and the rest, stocks, Stocks are like equity in companies. That's Tesla or MicroStrategy or companies along those lines. And then lastly, options. Options are the option to buy shares or sell shares of equities, right? It's three simple categories. So for me, I break it down into number one, I believe in Bitcoin. I just believe in it. Bitcoin is scary. Bitcoin's one of those things that if you've spent 1 hour researching it, you think it's magic internet money and it's stupid. If you spend 10 hours researching it, you start to get curious, but you still think it's stupid. If you've spent 100 hours researching it, now all of a sudden you've seen things you can't unsee and you're like, wow, that's really starting to make sense. Once you're where I am, where it's thousands of hours you've spent, you can't unsee it ever again. And you're like, you never look at the dirty pieces of paper in your wallet the same ever again, because you're like, oh, wow, the magic internet money backed by nothing is backed by energy. And the things in your wallet are backed by a handshake from somebody that's been stealing from you for years. That's
how much of your net worth, if not, you may know the exact number, but how much of your net worth is in cryptocurrency?
Approximately 10 to 15% directly in cryptocurrency. Well, about 10% directly in cryptocurrencies and 10% in what I would call cryptocurrency proxies. A proxy means I'm invested in MicroStrategy, not because I think it's the best business analytics software out there. There's other big companies called Oracle and Microsoft that are pretty big.
Yeah.
I'm invested in MicroStrategy because they have over $10 billion in Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So it's just an indirect way to invest in Bitcoin. When you add it all together, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20% of my net wealth.
Okay. That's stout. That's really stout. But I think that gives the listeners, that's kind of what I was trying to get to is if you're a new investor, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, that is on the outer edge of risk tolerance for most everyone. So if you peel it back from there, you got kind of a median risk tolerance. And inside that median risk tolerance is things like stocks, because they can go up, they can go down. So there's chance of loss, but there's also chance of gain, but it's not drastic, right? Like if you invest 100 grand in Tesla today, chances are it's not going to be worth 20 grand next week. And chances are it's not going to be worth $500,000 next week. It's going to be kind of in that range, right? Whereas with cryptocurrency, you could put 100 grand in something today and it could be literally 5 grand tomorrow. We know this. Not necessarily Bitcoin, but Bitcoin does make those runs. We had recently a run that's pulled back and it's recovering. Bitcoin is one of the more, it's not a stable coin, but it is one of the more stable cryptocurrencies. But for the new people, the new investors, that median risk, you talked about stocks. What would you say is safe? Is that like the bonds? Is that the T-bills? Is that the checking account that gives you 4%? What do you consider safe investments?
Safe, the absolute safest investments. If I was going to go from low to high, safest is the low, because it pays the least, but it's also the safest, is a 4.5%, 5% savings account. Coupled with, and that could be savings account, it could be treasury bills because they're about 5%, 4.5%, 5% right now. It could be, a lot of people just don't know how to go buy treasury bills. It's not as easy as one would think. That's why I said the savings account. Lastly, it could also be CDs. Mm-hmm. That's something we haven't talked about, but I have both. I have a savings account and CDs. So I have the emergency account in the savings account, which is in essentially liquid cash, earning 4.5%. Yeah. I then take that and take out a percentage of it, say 10%, as it builds, take 10% off the table and open up what's called a CD. A CD is a certificate of deposit. They have times ranging anywhere from 3 months to 3 years. The best paying one right now that I've found is, for me, because I keep everything at Capital One, my savings account and my CDs, is a 10-month CD paying 5.1% interest. That's guaranteed. That 10 months, you will earn 5.1% interest. The problem with the CD is you've locked it up for 10 months. If you take it out early, there's a penalty and you'll actually lose money. But if you're willing to lock it up for 10 months, and that's why it was only 10% of what was in the savings account. So that's step one. The next level of risk above that is like index, what I would call index funds. Your index funds are the ones that track the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, those types. Your index funds have very low fees. Generally speaking, are going to return between 6 to 8, maybe 10% per year, but the average over time is around 7 or 8%. Next step up from there would be investing in individual stocks. Individual stocks, Brandon, you mentioned Tesla. You could say Tesla, Google. You can even do the Magnificent Seven, as they call them, which is NVIDIA, Apple, Google, Amazon, Tesla, and I'm leaving something out, Microsoft. Those 7 companies alone have returned more than half of the returns from the S&P 500 over the last several years, right? They're all tech related. So when tech is doing well, they're doing well. But we live in a technology age right now. So if you're just getting started, just buy a little bit of each of those. The next step up from that, and I would say on equal footing, this is where I might differ a little bit, is Bitcoin. DCAing into Bitcoin. DCA, what does that stand for? Dollar cost averaging. If you buy every single day, and people are like, I didn't know. I thought I had to buy a whole Bitcoin. No, you can buy any fraction of it you want. So let's say you do $10 a day.
Oh, you just said something. I got to bring this up to you, Gary.
Bring it up.
So the Kentucky Derby just happened last weekend.
Yes.
Do you know one of those horses is owned by 200 owners? They tokenized. They fractionize the horse.
That's awesome.
And as soon as I heard that, I was like mind blown. I'm like, they fractionized the horse. That's like tokenizing. I'm serious. Like, I believe soon, and this is why I have given cryptocurrency my attention. I don't have the time that Gary has in it, and I don't have nearly the net worth. I think if I had to guess, maybe 5%, or maybe somewhere between 3 and 5% of my net worth is in cryptocurrency.
Yes. Which is still stout.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a big number. But when I heard that, I'm like, as soon as I heard it, I'm like, you know what? There's going to be professional sports teams that are tokenized, owned through cryptocurrency. There are going to be thousands of owners.
Bedford, which is not in the English Premier League, nor the first, second, or third of the championship leagues, but below that, believe it or not, there's a league even below. England has like 10 different leagues.
Yeah. Oh,
about
I know the guy. I know the podcast. Peter
McCormick.
I know the guy.
Peter McCormick. What Bitcoin did. And Peter McCormick.
What happened to Bitcoin today?
Their entire treasury is in Bitcoin. And so people can support the team by buying merchandise, which that money goes into the Bitcoin. They buy with Bitcoin. It goes into the Bitcoin treasury. And that's what Peter uses to pay the players and run the team off of. So you basically are a part owner in Real Bedford, which is over there in England. And tokenization, Brandon, you brought that up. Everything will be tokenized one day. The realtors that are on this, watching this podcast, they're going to hate me for saying this, but there will be a day in the next 5 to 10 years where you're not going to be getting those giant commission checks anymore. And you're not going to need to go do all the title searches and this search and that document and this document, and everything else. The deed is going to be on the blockchain, and it's just going to get passed from one owner to the next. And money's going to go the other direction, all in a smart contract. And you don't need anybody in between. And if that scares people and people go, yeah, but so many people are going to lose their jobs and all this, then maybe, just maybe, you spend an hour a day, an hour a week researching this area and getting yourself up to speed to future-proof you, yourself, and your industry. What if you're the only realtor in your area or the only mortgage broker in your area that knows how to do that?
Yep.
Everything will be fractionalized. And one of the
fastest ways to expand your network is to join a network.
So go back to the one last thing on that on that fractionalization and talking about Bitcoin. Even as something like $10 a day. See, we always talk about, well, when you're in sales and somebody goes, $100 a month, that's that's way too expensive. You say, well, can you afford $3 a day? And they're like, oh yeah, I can afford $3 a day. Okay, that's $100 a month. So take it the same way. What if you did $10 a day into Bitcoin? If I said $360 a month, you're like, I can't handle that. But $10 a day, you just make one less stop to Starbucks, right? It used to be $4, $5, $6. Now it's $10 for a freaking venti latte with caramel and oat milk and hold the whip and put extra foam on it, blah, 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 right?
Y'all got fancy Starbucks over there in Melbourne.
Fancy Starbucks. So then take that, Brandon, and go out at a average compound annual growth rate.
Bread chips? Do they have bread chips?
Do they have bread chips? That's an inside joke. Take that out to an annualized at 25% compound annual growth rate, and even $10 a day grows into $1 million after about 10 to 12 years. Sounds outrageous. Imagine if you just put $10 a day into something. Now, 25% compound annual growth rate, that's not guaranteed with Bitcoin, but the lowest it's been for any 4-year period is 23% to be exact. The highest it's been is 173%. And it's averaged 60 to 70%. So I'm assuming it averages 2.5 times less than that.
Yeah.
Over the next decade. The first 15 years, it averaged 70% growth per year.
Yeah. No doubt. It's something that people should pay attention to. More than anything, I'm not advising you guys to go become cryptocurrency experts or cryptocurrency investors. I do think you should start on the safe end. Like, do not start in cryptocurrency if you don't have a 6-month emergency fund. Like, do not do anything with cryptocurrency until you have no credit card debt. And in my opinion, you should probably have some stocks. Maybe you should own a home. There maybe should be some median investments before you go into cryptocurrency.
Think of it as a 3-legged stool, stocks, or 4-legged stool if you want to include the safety fund. Safety fund, stocks and equities, real estate, cryptocurrency. And you want that stool to be able to stand up like this. You don't want it tipping over on one corner or the other.
Yeah, I'm okay with that advice. I've got some strategies that we've talked about. And we'll talk about in some future podcasts when it comes to formulas. If you've got 10 grand, I believe that you should run a 60-30-10 pyramid, reverse pyramid, 10% in risk, 30% in median risk, and 60% in safe stuff until you get to the point where you've got enough money to live on the interest for the rest of your life. When you hit the number, like everybody should know their number, whatever the number it is that you are comfortable with for the rest of your life, that should be your investment formula. And then when you hit that number, reverse the pyramid.
Absolutely.
60% in high risk, 30% in the middle. And high risk can be startup. Like high risk can be venture capital. You've got a friend that wants to start a business. You got a friend that wants to open a yogurt shop. That's venture capital. Go have 100 grand for that friend. You be one of the people that someone calls you and says, hey, I need 200 grand.
Yes.
Right. Because those are the guys that become, and girls that become mega wealthy. Venture capitalists. If you can be the guy, it's just incredible.
And that pyramid, when it's 10, 30, 60, absolutely fantastic advice, which is why I started with like the savings account. And then I said stocks and all of that. And then out on the risk curve is the cryptocurrencies of the world. But as that one grows, the 10% should, in theory, because it's riskier, reward you more. As it rewards you more, bleed that money down to the 30%. And as the 30% grows, bleed that money down to the 60%. And just continue to grow the 60% bag until you're able to do what you said. So
yeah, what I'm talking about is like, I leave my investments. Yeah, I leave my investments in play. It's just the extra income. So my wife and I live on less than 50% of our income. Some of it has to go to taxes. Yes, I know some people say you can get to zero taxes, but I'm that's a whole nother podcast. That's a whole nother conversation. But we can live on about 20% of our income. You've got to have stuff for taxes. We actually invest about 50% of our income. And so of that 50%, that's the formula, right? A 60, 30, 10. And so, Gary, on the kind of
started as a 10, 30, 60, and now you're at a point where you can do the 60, 30, 10 because of that.
Yeah, I've done that. I've done some crazy investments over the last 24 months that would really make most people's skin crawl. In fact, my accountant, my tax strategist was like, "You did what?" And I'm like, "I'm good because we got that account sitting over there that we can live on for the rest of our life. So we can swing for the fences, which means you can make big mistakes. Most venture capitalists, 9 out of 11 ventures they go into fail. It's just going to happen. But going out of this thing, like let's wrapping this thing up. What has network marketing done for you that you would have never gotten outside of the network? Like, what are you most thankful for about network marketing? Why are you glad you did it 14 years later?
My goodness. To try to limit it to one thing would be profoundly difficult. I go back to the personal growth first and foremost, personal growth, because personal growth allowed me to go out and explore other things. My passion my whole life has been investing since I was 15 years old. But during my working years, I gave my money to somebody else to manage because I didn't have the time to do it myself because I was so busy working. So the personal growth that came along with it and the time freedom, the freedom to be a dad. One of my most prized possessions is a plaque that hangs on the wall over there that was presented to me by the Dad's Club at my son's school. I'm one of the 3 co-founders that got one of those plaques, meaning co-founded it when my kid was in kindergarten, and I served in the Dad's Club the entire time through 6th grade. And that may sound like, oh, yeah, some little token trophy to the rest of the world, but that plaque means I was there. It means I was there and I was a dad and I was present 24/7, 365. Sure, I had to go run off and do meetings sometimes. Sure, there was some overnights here and there. But the vast majority of my time was not spent working. It was spent being a dad during that time period when it mattered the most. So that's how it impacted my life. It made me see there's a different way. There's a better way. Our friend EW says that all the time. May not be the best way, but it may not be the only way, but it's a better way, or whatever his expression is.
It's not perfect. It's not perfect.
It's not perfect, but there's a better way.
It's just,
and that's what it is it impacted my life in a way to realize I could get my time back. I could get my freedom back. I could pursue the things that I absolutely loved. And at the same time, help thousands of people, millions of people along the way, depending on how big your business grows. And my whole life, I've wanted to help people. I didn't go into physical therapy and pharmaceuticals because I was in it for gain for myself. I wanted to help and serve others, but yet I was doing that and disserving myself in the process. Now I get to serve others and serve myself some in the process by giving myself that time and financial freedom that seems so elusive to the average person working the 40-40-40 plan, 40 years work for 40 years to retire on 40% of what they couldn't live on anyway.
Yeah.
40 hours a week, 40 years to retire on 40% of what they couldn't live on anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate, glad, we got the chat today, and I appreciate that answer, because in the long run, you can have all the money and all the investments, but the most valuable thing is the time, because then you get to choose how you use that time. And there are those moments, there's seasons in your life, right? There's a season when you're raising kids at the house. There's just seasons. Or maybe there's a season, like you said, when illness comes into a family, that if you can build a residual check, if you can build a leverage check in network marketing, it just gives you the ability to be present during those seasons. And
Brandon, I can give back now. I don't want it to ever appear like I don't. As you know, and many of the people who are listening to this probably know, I coach people on investing nowadays. I bring on at least, I don't even like to use the word charity case because that demeans the person, but I bring on one person, a minimum per month in need, and coach them for free. I don't charge them for coaching. I do it because I do it selfishly because I get value out of it, watching them change their lives, knowing that I helped somebody else that otherwise was just going to fall victim to the system. And who knows what would happen to them. And I've worked with people that have lost everything. I have a guy right now that's dying of cancer, and he's been having appointments with me, and I don't charge him anymore for his appointments. And I told him, your next couple of appointments, we need to get your wife on these appointments with you.
Yeah.
Because it's getting to that time.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, you may not know who to turn to. You may not have family that's very well versed in all of these things, but you got a guy in Florida that's part of your family right now. And I would have never had the opportunity. If I was still a pharmaceutical rep, I wouldn't have been able to help that guy.
Yeah.
I would have thought my drugs would have helped him. But obviously, all the drugs in the world aren't helping the guy. He's going to pass away of cancer.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is his wife's name is Carol. Carol will be taken care of.
Right.
I will make sure of that. I'll make sure of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. Really, really good stuff. Gary, thanks for being on today. I appreciate your knowledge and some of the inside jokes. You guys will just have to buy Gary and I a beer some way, and we can give you the inside jokes. But anyway,
we'll have bread chips with those beers.
Yeah. Thanks for being on, man. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
All right, man. See you, Brandon.